Hello, I'm Jessica Luciana, and this is my paper for the 7th SEPEL, the first online SEPEL in our university. The title of my paper, as you can see, is Listen to Them, the Children of the Night, What Music They Make, an analysis of learners' interlanguage. And this paper was advised by Professor Fabiana Almeida. This paper is a result of my participation in the research group of Língua e Cognição, with a special focus on bilingualism. So it was actually a teaching project that happened during the semester. It was offered online, and this paper is a result of my participation there. In the next 15 minutes or so, I'll be talking to you about my project. So basically the introduction of my project, which will be a little contextualization, the objectives of my research, the main concepts that I had to research, and I will be explaining to you the next steps of this research, because it's an ongoing project, and the bibliography I used for this study. So first of all, the source of all this activity here is a book club I have with some students of mine in the school I work for. So we have this book club, and the book club, it started because I noticed students didn't have much contact with real literature, or let's say spontaneous reading during their courses. So I invited these two participants, Tiana and Belle. They will be referred as Tiana and Belle from now on. And I invited these two participants from one of my classes. They are intermediate and advanced level students. And we are currently reading Dracula. We have read The Wizard of Oz. We have read some tales by Edgar Allan Poe, for example, The Telltale Heart, and also The Frankenstein. So we were already into the horror literature there. I gave them the options of what to read, and they chose Dracula. And we meet once a week, usually on Wednesdays or Fridays, and we have been reading Dracula for 2.5 months now. Why so long, right? Because my students, my participants, they are the ones who set the pace, basically. So I usually assign 2 to 3 chapters to be read during the week, but then if they didn't have time, we discuss the chapters they could read. During these encounters, during these meetings, what I could notice is that students, they are freer to participate. They bring the topics themselves, what they want to discuss. So it is a very student-centered class. They are the ones talking most of the time, and because of this nature of this class, I could identify, I could observe some characteristics of my students' performance, of my students' oral production especially, that I didn't have the opportunity before. And I will be not explaining the reasons why, but I will present some theories for this bigger and more spontaneous participation in class. So this is my context here. Based on this diagnose, it's a pre-diagnose, this is not a part of the project yet. I got curious about some things that I noticed on them, especially because of their levels. So I created some objectives for this research, right, based on these observations. So my primary objective with this research here is to present to you some theories and concepts that I had to study during the research project course, right? So while I was in the research group, I could see these academic topics and these academic researches and identify the correlation between the academic and my practice. So I will be presenting to you the extensive reading concept, interlanguage concept, mistakes and errors, and cross-linguistic transfer, because I want to professionalize my practice, and I thought that this would be a start, right? And as a secondary objective for this research, which will not be presented today, because as I said previously, it is an ongoing project, I will establish a foundation and a framework of reference for a later analysis of my students' interlanguage. I am using interlanguage in this presentation as a synonym for oral production. So these are my objectives. Again, I would like to reinforce that it is an ongoing project, so this presentation will be more about the main concepts that I had to study in order to further on lead an analysis. So one of the main concepts that we need to discuss in this presentation is extensive and intensive reading. Intensive reading, on the one hand, is the kind of reading that we usually do in classroom, which is a graded level, a graded material, right? So it's a material that was created thinking of a certain level of proficiency. These texts and materials, they are usually shorter, right? And students, they read these materials with an educational purpose in mind. So they usually have questionnaires, they usually have other things that they have to do with the material. So reading is not the main purpose, is actually finding information, right? This is intensive reading. And what we actually do in the book club is extensive reading, which is the reading of original and diverse material that wasn't manipulated for a certain level of English proficiency, English in our case, of course. And also, as I mentioned before, students chose what book they would like to read, and they are reading for pleasure and for information. So it wasn't something brought to them, it was something chosen by them. And also, I read with them, so teachers read along with students as role models, but also because we have to discuss together. So reading is essential in order for the class to work. So these are some characteristics of extensive reading. And by using extensive reading in my classes, I got the chance of having students talking more, of really trying to express themselves. And whenever we have a situation where students have to express language meaningfully, in a meaningful environment, in a meaningful way, we can observe their interlanguage, which is the linguistic system that students create when they are attempting to communicate in a certain situation. Interlanguage is not only the transfer of their native language to their target language. There are other aspects to be considered, but for now I would like to focus on the idea that interlanguage is a third system that is developed while students or while learners are in the process of acquiring a second language. I'm sorry, second language, no, a target language, okay? There are some characteristics of this system. So it is dynamic because students, they can change their system all the way. It is permeable because all their interactions in the language can change the rules and ideas of their interlanguage. It is variable because each student's interlanguage is different from another, and it is systematic because there is a rule, there is logic in their interlanguage, even though sometimes this logic is not the same of the target language and not the same of their native language, because it is it is the result of students trying to communicate effectively using another language, right? So this is interlanguage. It makes sense that sometimes the students they have different moments of speaking, right? So they are not always going to get the rules right. They are not always going to make only mistakes, right? Because of this whole idea of being dynamic, of being permeable. Thinking about their interlanguage, we must talk also about the cross-linguistic transference theory by CUMMINS, and also the iceberg theory, because in this theory we have one main aspect that I'm going to explore here, which is the common underlying language proficiency, that and this theory, claims that the bigger the common underlying language proficiency of a student, the easier or the better their transfer will be. It will basically happen. Transfer will happen, but the bigger their underlying proficiency, the better. Because, for example, my students, they have higher education levels, right? And they're masters and they're doctors. And because of this higher level of education in Portuguese, right? They have a higher level of proficiency of domain of their language, because they have to use language in formal and informal contexts, and they have to make decisions all the time. And also their metacognition is higher too, because of all these years of training, right? Because it's basically training there. They had to understand how they learn and how language works and the nuances that you have in language. So their process of transferring from one language to another, because of their metacognition, is more effective, we could say, because transfer is done in a very aware manner. So they are aware of the process. And the iceberg theory of CUMMINS is basically saying that the bigger their common underlying language proficiency, so the bigger their proficiency in Portuguese and in English, the bigger their social language will be too, because this is what shows here on top. You have the dual peaked iceberg, because you have here the common underlying proficiency and the academic language in both languages, and then you have the what really appears, which is their social language, so basically what they are producing at the time that we have our encounters. Thinking of this capacity of transferring from one language to another, I have to mention that there are two types of transference. I'm not going to be deep in that part, okay? We'll be talking about it a little superficially because of time. If you are interested in learning more about transference, you can contact Professor Fabiana Almeida. We are going to leave some material for you here. But talking about this transference, we have to mention that there are two types of transference, so positive and negative transference. Negative transference does not always mean that students will make mistakes and transfer from one language to another in a wrong way. Negative transfer can help students understand that their native language is different from their target language, and they have this comparison happening there. But there are transfers happening, and sometimes transfer can be done wrong. So sometimes the native and the target language system is not that related, right? So that came to me during the observations, that sometimes students make mistakes, right? And the definition of mistake by R.Ellis is that a mistake is an occasional lapse in performance, and that means that students really know what the correct form is, but for some reason they fail to use it. So for example, when we are talking and we really want to communicate with the other person, or we want to talk fast, or um, we want to really come across, okay, to another person, sometimes we don't focus too much on form, so that's when lapses happen, and these are considered mistakes. While errors, on the other hand, they are caused by true gaps in learners' language, right, in learners' knowledge, I'm sorry. So in my analysis, I would like to talk about these two differences there and see how the transfer is being done, and how languages mistakes and errors reflect their knowledge of language, and their quality of transference, let's say. But I haven't done that research yet, so keep posted. I'll keep you posted. These are the main concepts of my future research, right? So this is what I am studying right now in order to have a very strong foundation to do my analysis. And for the next steps of this research, I am going to develop a proposal. So as you could see, I only had some objectives. They weren't really clear yet, even though I have many things to be curious about. So I will write a proposal. After the writing of the proposal and establishing my research questions and my real objectives and the ones that I really want to investigate, I will submit this proposal to the committee, ethics committee, because it is a human research, right? It is a research with humans, so I need the approval of the committee in order to conduct my research. The third step of my research would be to do the transcription of my students' productions. So I would record our meetings, and I would transcript them and analyze their interlanguage, focusing on mistakes and errors, and also in the things that they did right, let's say. So how their interlanguage develops. And also after this analysis, hopefully I will do the publication of my results and conclusions. So this would be the next steps of my research. These are my references here. So this was my paper for this SEPEL. Thank you very much for watching until now, and I hope you have enjoyed. If you have any questions or comments, you can just leave them down below, and I'll be answering you throughout the week. Thank you very much, and bye!